it's Michael Angelo Caruso. Welcome to another Talk to Me podcast. We have an educational session today with Mike Smela. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Michael. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for doing this. We're going to
Sure.
talk today about, give you a little financial education on a topic I've been long fascinated with, which is student loans and how they really work, because Mike actually knows. Most people don't know. Before we get going with Mike, I want to remind you, if you're listening to this podcast on a audio platform, you can watch the video version on the Michael Angelo Caruso YouTube channel. And if you're watching this video now with us, you can catch the audio version on Podbean, iTunes, all the major platforms. That's for when you're riding in the car or running on the treadmill. Mike, this conversation usually first came about because, and I've long been interested in this, a little background on my bad self. I did not get a student loan. A lot of people think I'm bitter about this because I got a student loan and I got burned. Not the case. I worked at a grocery store called Chatham's. Do you remember Chatham's here in
I
Michigan?
do remember.
And
Yeah,
it
we're a
was a
little
union.
gray in the hairs. Yeah, yeah.
It was a union shop at the time, and I think I was earning something like 18 bucks an hour back in 1975, 76, and I earned enough money to pay my way through college. Now, a little unhappy ending here. I did not graduate from college because I ran out of money. And I didn't want to get a student loan because I didn't have a way to pay it back. I didn't understand how that would work, and I wasn't comfortable doing it. So I'm not bitter, but flash forward years and years later, where President Biden, and this is not a political thing, could have been a Republican president, happens to be a Democratic president that's pushing it through, is has already authorized billions of dollars in student loan relief. He's not finished yet. He'd like, I think, to get all the debt excused. And I started looking at this because I have history with this thing, and I'm like, this is interesting because that doesn't fix the student loan or the education problem. It's just a stopgap. And 10 more years, we're going to have to waive all that debt again, which is this idea of not people not thinking, which I know you're fond of this theory, and I want to hear from you in a second. Uh, uh, well, let's hear from you now. On premise, you think this is messed up. You think maybe it's even a scheme of sorts.
Well, let's just say that it's part of a bigger picture,
Okay.
and part of a bigger, I don't know what you want to call it, a problem, whatever. It is what it is. I spent 35 plus years in the financial world. Um, I was in the mortgage business for about 17 years, owned my own mortgage company. I was a quote financial professional.
Right.
And I was taught what I was taught and, grew up believing all these things. And actually in 2006, a group that I was working with um, started to change my thinking about 180 degrees on everything that we had been led to believe about money and debt and everything else. Um, and I questioned. My mind was, this is what I was always taught, and I needed to believe that. Yet now I'm uncovering information that is 180 degrees in a different direction. And I struggled with it for a while, but I kept digging. I kept asking. I went, back then Google wasn't real big, but you go through page 2, 3, 5, 10. You look at different information and you learn about different things. And all of a sudden, one day it's like this revelation came that, wait a minute, this thing that we call debt, these things that are called loans, maybe they're not really what we've been led to believe.
Okay.
Question being, do banks really lend us money?
Yeah.
When you
And I
get
want
a
to get into
student
this
loan,
because you chased the money. What was that line from Jerry Maguire? Follow the money. You chased it. And just to further frame this up for folks, and if you want to follow along at home, if you just pull up Facebook and you type into Facebook, Michael Angelo Caruso, student loans, my post from April 9th, and this is 2024, everybody. comes up, and I frame it this way, that the forgiveness of student debt debate isn't much of a debate. This is the thing that got a lot of comments, this whole 74 comments initially when it came out. That the media and most people talk about that the education model is broken. It's impossible to pay off student loans. It's unfair to saddle people with runaway interest. We must do something. That's what everybody talks about. But the conversation just about ends there because, as you say, there's a system in place, and most people can come up with a better, cogent idea. So the deeper questions, this is what I want to get into with you, Mike, is when debt gets canceled, I'll just ask the questions one at a time because you were very articulate in your comments. I'm going to let you verbalize them here today for our friends. When student debt gets canceled, it feels like in the media, it feels like, oh, that's handy. I mean, on the face of it, it seems like the government paid off the debt, or maybe not. Maybe the government just waived the debt and the university never got paid. What really happens when debt gets canceled?
Well, what let's go back to the very beginning. In order to, excuse me, in order to cancel a debt, there needs to be a debt that begins. So the question becomes, when you sign that promissory note for the student loan, the big question, whether it's a student loan, whether it's a credit card debt, whether it's an auto loan, whether it's a mortgage loan, the real question becomes, where did the money come from to lend the money to you and to pay the educational institution?
Good question.
And that's the first question. Canceling the debt becomes nothing once you understand, where did the money really come from?
Where does the money come from?
Well, as a banker, as a 17 plus year mortgage professional that was in the business, I always thought, like I believe most people thought, that the money has to come from one of two places. Either the bank's reserves, it's got to come from the bank, right? Or their depositors' money. Where else can it come from?
Okay.
Would that be a fair statement that most people would think
I think
the
so.
money comes from the bank or the money comes from their depositors' money? What I what I learned is, and this is direct from the Federal Reserve in a document in a booklet called Modern Money Mechanics, which was originally put together by the Federal Reserve in 1961 and then later updated in 1992, is, and this is verbatim, banks cannot lend their own money nor their depositors' money. For if they did, and here's the big part, there would be no new money created. Now let that sink in for a little bit. What does that mean?
Go
What does
ahead.
that mean to you?
I'm not sure I understand what you just said.
As you delve into it more, again, this isn't me. This isn't some conspiracy theory. This isn't some anti-government stuff. This is direct from the Federal Reserve, basically letting people know that all money is debt and that when banks lend money, the money is literally created out of thin air. It's not there.
But
Well, where
money,
is it?
but currency or some units of currency, if I'm the student that's taking the loan, come to me from someplace. Is it what do
So
you think?
here's
It's a paper
so
ad?
here's how it happens. Let's go through. You're a student. You're looking for a $10,000 student loan.
Yeah,
Okay, you go to ABC Bank or the Fannie Mae or whoever does it. Okay, uh, and you say they say, great, you're approved for a $10,000 student loan.
right.
Sit down and sign the loan documents. So Bank A is going to lend you money for $10,000. It's going to go to ABC school. You sit down, you sign the promissory note that says, hey, I'll agree to pay back $10,000 to whoever at an interest rate of X% over a certain number of times, years, once I graduate or whatever. Okay. Here is what happens from the technical standpoint. The bank, your signature on that student loan, on that promissory note, your signature is the only thing of value in that transaction. And this goes down a deeper,
Because
bigger rabbit hole.
agreed, because I'm the student, I've agreed to pay that money back from future earnings, money that I currently do not have.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yes, on the surface, yes. Okay. So the bank then takes that, they flip that promissory note then becomes a marketable financial instrument. They turn that over, they stamp it, pay to the order of ABC Bank, and they go into their computer, which gets hooked up through the Federal Reserve System, and it says, hey, let's create a new credit account for $10,000. Federal Reserve says, okay, great. Boom, the money appears. From where? Completely out of thin air. Wasn't there. Bank didn't have it. Federal Reserve didn't have it. It got literally created by a couple keystrokes on a computer.
Is this for a future? Uh, so I took accounting in college. I did not do well, but there's a plus and a minus.
So there's a
They have
balance, right?
credit,
So you have a credit account. Now there needs to be a debit account, right?
right?
Okay.
And I think the premise here, this is the illusion that you talk about, is that that other shoe is going to drop at some point, but we haven't quite gotten to that in the conversation yet.
Right. So the $10,000, the money comes completely out of thin air and it's on one side of the balance sheet. Automatically, there becomes a debit account for the $10,000 as well. So the $10,000 is now deposited into that bank from the Federal Reserve, completely out of thin air. And the bank then pays the institution. So the $10,000 then goes to the institution. So now we've got a debit account for $10,000, the credit account, which is now the debt, which is backed only by our signature. So now we've got an even balance sheet on their sheet.
Okay.
Okay.
Why doesn't this work? What's wrong with that? So it came out of thin air. What's the problem?
So I really like to try and keep things basic. I'm not a really intelligent guy. I don't have all deep degree, whatever. I'm pretty basic guy. Michael, let me ask you this. If you said, hey Mike, I need to borrow $10,000, and I said, sure, I'll lend you $10,000, and we draw up an agreement and I lend you $10,000, and then you run into trouble and you say, oh gosh, I can't pay you back. And then you, through some digging, find out that the $10,000 that I lent you was never mine to lend in the first place. What's the word for that in a common language?
Are you going to use a mafia term?
No, I'm going to use a word that starts with F. It's called fraud.
Okay.
I committed fraud.
Because
I lent you money that I never had.
okay.
And you were led to believe that it was my money. Correct?
I'm with you so
So
far.
in a contract, in a legal contract, both sides have to bring something of value to the table. What the Federal Reserve is telling us is the bank never lent any money. They're saying it very plain and simple. So the question becomes when the student loan, the student all of a sudden says, hey, I can't pay back the student loan. What right does the bank have to come and say, oh, yes, you do. You owe us money because you signed here. Otherwise, you're a bad debt, when they never lent money to begin with?
So actually, the bad debt originated as a bad loan. I mean, it reminds me, I got in trouble during the recession because I was granted a loan that I shouldn't have been granted, and I couldn't pay it back. I ended up having to short sell the house. It's a bad time in my life. But I could have never done that if some people hadn't overlooked the fact that I had no way to pay the loan back. So now let's wind up to the Fed. Why is President Biden, and again, this is not I'm not interested in a political discussion. It could be any president. Why is the current president so interested in waiving this debt? Some people say he's buying votes for the upcoming election. I don't, I think it's more complicated than that. Could it be that eventually the government could get busted, not maybe for fraud, but something that's didn't serve us in our best interest, and they don't want to get caught with this? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, my politics is very simple. I know they're all crooks.
Okay.
And until the Federal Reserve, until we as a nation come to realize that the real evil that keeps us all from accomplishing what we want to is that our monetary system is in the control of our nation's monetary system is in the control of the hands of private bankers. Until we realize that, we're all doomed. So why is he doing it? I don't know. I have no idea. But what I do know is canceling student loan debt is not a bad thing for an individual saying, oh my gosh, now they're getting off scot-free. The reality of it is the bank was making money every time a payment was made. It's 100% profit because they never lent money to begin with. So the loans themselves, what's there to forgive when the money never came from the bank?
And that creates an interesting math problem, not problem, windfall. If the loan came from nothing in the first place, and you have this runaway interest, the bank's actually making money on a deal that never. I mean, it's a fascinating little puzzle that you're presenting here. Let me ask you
Which,
this. Um, Question number two.
sure.
Does debt cancellation, I just want your opinion on this, in 2024 penalize folks who obtained student loans and paid them off? Forget about the illusion of the money being loaned and all that stuff, or where the money came from. Does that seem fair to you that the people that a bunch of people are getting their debt excused, but there were plenty of people that I went to school with, for example, that paid their debt. They figured it out, they paid it off. Or were those people taken in a worse way than the people who got their debt waived?
I'm one of those people. I had student loan debt. I paid it all off, paid $172.63 every year for 10 years. I paid it all off. Um, Knowing what I know now, am I, if this student loan quote forgiveness comes through, would I be um bitter? No,
Yeah.
because what I know now, yeah, I was taken. What I know now, Michael, very honestly, again, and this is according to the Federal Reserve. I'm not, it's right there in plain writing. Every loan is fraud, which is a
Loan
very,
from the
very
Fed or
difficult thing for people to wrap their minds around.
every loan
Same
from the
thing with your
Fed,
mortgage loan. Sorry.
every loan from the Fed or every loan?
Well, every loan since 1913 has come from the Fed.
Oh no, you were going to loan me $10,000 a minute ago.
Oh, okay. So let's back up. Private. Let's take private loans completely out of the equation.
Okay.
Okay. So, for instance, I actually own whatever. I have a house that my son, I purchased for my son, and we did a land contract with the owner of the house. So they basically are the bank. I have no problem paying him back. But a bank loan where the money comes from nothing, now I got a problem with that.
Okay.
Real issue with that.
All right, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question number three. Debt cancellation may help the people who are currently saddled with debt, but what's the plan for not having to cancel billions more debt in the future? If this is a broken system And if I'm reading this right, debt cancellation here in 2024 is just a stopgap. It doesn't actually solve the problem. We still have a broken system where people have to borrow all kinds of money they don't have, get this invisible loan or whatever, and we just go through this whole thing again in 10 more years. Is that what you see happening?
Well, yes, absolutely. And your question also brings up an even bigger question, which is what is money and what is our current money based off of?
I should have scheduled a longer podcast.
I'm sorry. I know, Michael, the rabbit hole is incredibly deep. But I haven't gotten anywhere near the end of it, and I probably never will. But it's not my point to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole. My point for myself, my family, and people that I love is how do we take information and make it work, leverage different vehicles and information to make it work for us.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
way down on down here when they're playing way up here. The reality is our money since 1913 is debt. It is a debt instrument. If you look at every single dollar bill, it is not. It is a Federal Reserve note. It says so right on the top. And a note is an IOU. It's debt. So can let me try and make this simple, but it's going to blow people's minds. You've got all the student loan debt, you've got all the mortgage debt, you've got all the national debt. If all the debt in the United States was completely quote paid off, there would be no money because our money is based off of a system of debt.
yeah.
And that's a lot for people to
This
handle.
was the argument, and by the way, on my way, I'm going to go back even further in history. 1913 was when the Federal Reserve was created, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's go back even a couple hundred years before that. That was the argument between Hamilton and Jefferson, I think, about whether to have our country in debt or debt free. Was it Hamilton that favored debt and Jefferson did not? Or was it the other way around?
Correct. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson said that, and I don't know the quote exactly, but basically he said if he fears the day that our nation wakes up under the control of private banks, because at that point in time, all of our land, all of our kids, all of everything will be taken from us.
Yeah. Yeah, they were.
And that is a very, very true statement. Andrew Jackson fought like heck. His major event in his life and in his presidency was that he killed the second central bank. He killed the bankers.
That's
He
right.
loved that. 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act came into play, President McKinley, once he understood what he was hoodwinked into signing, he said, I unknowingly just ruined our country. It's the bankers, it's the monetary system that we need to be focused on, people, not the political stuff, not the right versus left, the Republicans versus, they're all puppets.
Yeah. When I look at
We're focused on the wrong
problems
thing.
like this, I try to focus, of course, and I think that's most people's reflexive way to analyze the problem. We're going to focus, but I find sometimes it's better to have a broader view. We've been talking so far about United States and American debt and the American banking system. Don't other countries have the same problem if they have
Absolutely. This
central
the
bank
America,
or operate
right?
on?
America's problem, or America's in 1913 with the Federal Reserve, the central bankers. Um, you go back a couple hundred years before that, and the Rothschilds in the Bank of England basically said that I care not what puppet is in control of Parliament, so long as I control the monetary supply, and I control the monetary supply. Every central banker and every country that has a central bank, which again, if you look back in history, I believe now, oh gosh, I can't remember. There might be one country that doesn't have a central bank,
Yeah.
but
That-
otherwise, Go ahead. Sorry.
That begs the question, and we have a lot of evidence that conventional and traditional wisdom holds that it's better to have a central bank, it's better to be in debt, it's better to do student loans. How could it work otherwise?
It's better for the bankers.
But how could it work
If
otherwise if we didn't have that system? And by the way, I'm not a fan of how higher education is paid for in this country. That's what got this whole thing started. I'm not defending it. I'm just asking what's better. How else can how else can your kids and my I don't have any kids, hypothetically, my children pay for their education if they can't get a student loan?
so, uh, okay, let's back up a little bit. The cost of education. The cost of education is so huge now. You go back to what you were talking about, follow the money trail. Everything goes back to money and debt and the bankers.
Yeah,
Why my question is, why does it cost 30 to $50,000 a year to go to college?
yeah, I knew you were going to go there.
That's insane.
That's not the only thing that's broken. You mean lots of
Right.
research on this. They go to school to get a degree. Uh,
Well, I don't know.
they
I
change the
went to
degree.
school to become educated. I believe now, and that's a bigger thing now, is our education system just job training programs, or is it to be educated? That's a whole different discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to throw, we're not going to answer all these today, but just to throw a
Right.
couple more logs on the fire. You go to school to get a degree, you change that degree on your way to getting that degree. You get a degree in something you can't get a job in. So now you're working outside that degree. You've got this student loan that's going to follow you for 30 years. What else? The college did very little to hook you up with your desired degree because there's no connectivity anymore between
They
colleges.
got paid.
To have job placement when I was in school. I don't know if it
Oh yeah.
still works or if they
I
even
don't,
still
I
have
don't
it.
know.
Pretty sure it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and Michael, let me back up. How a lot of the how I got into a lot of this is I actually owned a mortgage company called Physician Lender. And it was a very specialized loan company that provided home loans for early career physicians.
Oh, that is very
So,
specific.
yeah, it was very specific, but it also came with very specific things. Early career physicians have no money,
Right,
boatloads of student loan debt. They aren't making much money as residents, but they want to buy a house because they're going to be in a residency for 3 to 5 years.
right.
Then they sign a new contract, but that now their student loans are coming due. So I started to educate these young professionals on how to pay off what their debt really means.
Yeah,
And I did a lot of debt management workshops, and that's a lot. That's a big part of where a lot of this started coming into play. I realized in 2004, 2005, 2006 that, oh my gosh, if I'm getting these kids into home loans with no money out of their pocket, what happens if real estate doesn't increase by 10 to 15% a year for the 3 years or 4 years they're going to be in this house? They're going to be in trouble. So that's where this whole the impetus for me was, oh my gosh, I need to start to relook at this whole debt issue. That's how this all kind of came about. Is I would do seminars at U of M, at MSU, at Wayne State for these early career physicians looking at me going, Mike, I've got a $300,000 in student loan debt. When I signed my first contract, plus I want to get a home loan, everything else, they're in debt three, four, $500,000, and they may get out making $150,000 a year. The numbers aren't going to work out because they're probably going to be a W-2 employee. So 35 to 40% are going right to taxes. Yeah, they're like, how can I make this work? And that was my challenge was how do I help these people to these professionals that we all kind of count on?
yeah.
How do I help them? And so that's where a lot of this all started.
So if we've chased the problem quite a bit down the rabbit hole, as you say, but we haven't chased the solution very far down the rabbit hole. And I realize neither of us are going to solve this today, but I think you're onto something with it because it becomes like this giant domino effect. We have overpriced institutions requiring a lot of money. Where's the money going to come from? Student loans. Now we have this problem, and it cascades into this morass of unworkable, untenable situations. I like what you were saying. Well, we need to reduce the cost of college education. How do you do that? You're going to pay the professors less. You're going to shut down universities, create two or three universities in the country instead of having all this duplication of services. What's the solution there?
The solution, and this is going to sound very oversimplified, but it is unfortunately the reality and the fact. The solution is we need to end the Federal Reserve.
Oh,
We
wow.
need sure, because it all comes back to money. Here is the reality.
Yeah.
Our great nation, and this is a very difficult thing for people to even possibly wrap their head around, but it is unfortunately the truth. Our great nation borrows money. Every single dollar that is in existence today borrows money from a group of private bankers. And here's the kicker. And our nation pays perpetual interest on that money. It's the interest component that drives everything.
Yeah.
Our nation borrows money from the private bankers.
Yeah.
And they charge our country interest. That interest is perpetual. Where does the country come up with the monies to pay the interest back to the bankers? Taxes, fees, they got to come from somewhere. Where is it? It's all of us.
Yeah. Well, lots of systems uh, are in this perpetual thing. Think about population. We have to keep having children so that we can have workers, right? Um, Ending the Federal Reserve does not make education affordable. I'm not hearing that from you yet.
Okay, here's how it does.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way that Jefferson, the way that Kennedy was the last one to try and take down the Federal Reserve.
Who was
That,
that?
that JFK.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let me throw scenario two into play. Our nation creates its own money, even out of thin air,
They
whatever.
printed.
And it is controlled by the US Treasury. It is controlled by the people of the United States with zero interest cost of that money. When you take out, if all you're paying back is principal to our own nation, and you take out compounding interest, the compounding effect is massive. When you
Right.
take that out of the equation, then everything becomes a heck of a lot more affordable.
Right. Um,
Who gets screwed out of that? Well, the private bankers that control the country, that control the world. Well, I don't care.
yeah, this has been fascinating. I'm just trying to tie up some loose ends here in my own head um, as we wrap up. If we did away with the Federal Reserve, we'd also be one of the only developed countries in the world that didn't have central bank. Would that cause problems with us with other countries?
Well, where it would cause problems is it would cause problems because the other countries are under the control of the bankers who don't want to lose their money. If you controlled everything, Michael, if you were the one that controlled everything and somebody started chipping away at your power and
Yeah.
money and greed, you wouldn't like it
No.
and you'd fight back. Um, it, if every country did that, yeah. So we cut the puppeteers out of the game. Okay, fine. Then we figure out how to work together on things. So what? We cut out the true evil in the world.
Yeah. So you think we'd be in a better place with that fresh
God, we
problem?
have to. We
Yeah.
have to. And my other and I don't I'm a believer in goodness and that somehow things are going to work out. I don't know how this is going to play out right now
Yeah.
because this is a system that cannot continue. It cannot continue with, it'll continue for the bankers, but it won't continue for us. And my God, that's who we need to focus on is us, the people that we love. I mean, we are what make up the world, but they control it. We
Yeah,
got to, I don't know.
fascinating.
I
I
don't have the answers, my friend, but I've learned enough to know what the real problem is, and the real problem is not the Democrats or the Republicans or this side or that side. The real problem is
money.
the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating take on this, Mike. I knew you'd be fun to talk to. Of course, we didn't solve anything today, but maybe we'll get some people
No,
thinking and asking more
exactly.
intelligent questions. And most importantly, because you've addressed a pretty big problem with hair and teeth, is that they don't get in trouble in their own lives with debt and worry, which is going to cause you to make other stupid decisions, maybe that aren't going to do well for you and your family. That's what we wanted to do today, was shine the flashlight a little
Is
bit.
we've always been taught that knowledge is power, correct? Well, in my mind, what I have realized is that knowledge is only potential power, because we have a lot of very educated, a lot of very motivated people in this world who are completely broke or have no idea what's going on. This is the third component. We need the right vehicles. And what I have learned is that there are different vehicles out there to help us accomplish, once we understand different information, once we create different motivations. As I say, Tiger Woods is a great golfer. He's got motivation, he's got skills. But if he teed up a beach ball at at the Masters, there's no way in hell he's going to win, regardless of it all. You
Right.
need the right vehicles.
I appreciate your wisdom today and your perspective on this pesky little problem. Let's get together soon.
I would love to, my friend. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I hope we did shed some light. And hope, just think differently, people. Think differently and learn differently. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Michael.